moral imperative on what we should do is evident. The mechanics of it, how best to achieve success, is not always so obvious. Our third story on the countdown, the immediate appointment of a special prosecutor is not a good idea in bringing to account those responsible for torture. So says Elizabeth de la Vega, a former federal prosecutor and a former U.S. Attorney's chief, who will join us presently. MoveOn.org has today sent a video to its members urging them to sign a petition asking Attorney General Holder to take such immediate action, to appoint one now. But even after years of inaction, Ms. de la Vega posits that Mr. Holder should wait or else risk, quote, dumping the entire issue of torture into a black hole. In brief, her thesis that since the appointment of a special prosecutor leads to the public initiation of a federal grand jury, quote, potential targets or subjects who might previously have felt comfortable enough to speak publicly and further incriminate themselves will clam up. Further, information that was previously public may be transformed into secret grand jury material, so there will be no public narrative, possibly for years. Joining me now, I promise, former federal prosecutor who was chief of the San Jose branch of the U.S. Attorney's Office and was a member of the Organized Crime Strike Force, also author of United States versus George W. Bush et al., Elizabeth de la Vega. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thanks for having me, Keith.
Is it your belief, then, that the last few days, this cascade of information, the release of the torture memos and then the release of the Levin report and Dick Cheney's statements, that this is a spigot that gets turned off the moment a special prosecutor is named and that would inhibit prosecutions?
Well, I think what would happen is as soon as a special prosecutor is named, there will be, of course, a grand jury. And the reports that still remain to be released will still get released. But Congress will have a perfect opportunity, people from either party who do not want this to be publicly aired, to say, well, we're not going to do anything else. And if the administration is inclined, which I am not I'm not of the belief that they necessarily are, but if they were inclined to completely bury this, they too would have a perfect excuse. So this is exactly what we saw with the Libby case. As September 30th, 2003, the special prosecutor decision was made, and we basically didn't hear anything else about that until 2005.
So that's the other aspect here of the public narrative, in your opinion, that obviously it would be essential if we're going to exercise, if we can use that term, this mess from this country. But this is the other idea, that if you don't have a public narrative, you don't have an impetus, and the thing sort of leaves the front pages?
Absolutely. And there are several aspects to that. One is that if this goes into the grand jury, we don't have any guarantee that any indictments will be issued, number one. There's a sort of a public impression, I think, especially among progressives, that there's a surefire path to indictments, and there isn't. And again, if you look at the Libby case, for example, we ended up, and I don't criticize Patrick Fitzgerald at all, either his conduct or his integrity. I think I wouldn't question the way it turned out, but what we ended up with was the indictment of Libby on perjury, and we never did have the story, the full story. So I think we need to come at this from several angles at once. Let the public narrative keep going, and you're right, it's a spigot, and we need to let this flood continue. And not only does that allow for eventually to have a cohesive public story, it really enables the internal Justice Department people to have time to look at all these documents, and there are hundreds of thousands of them. There's no reason to – oh, excuse me.
No, I'm sorry. But there's one other point that you made in here that seems really to the point and not widely publicized, that the independent counsel law expired in 1999. Could we not have an independent prosecutor at this point? Do we need to pass another law before there is one in this case?
Well, I don't think we need to pass another law, and I actually don't think we should, but I think the concept of an independent prosecutor is kind of an illusion. So really what it is it's almost more than anything a PR move on the part of an administration that wants to get people to stop talking about something. And, for example, I believe that that's what the Bush administration did with allowing a special prosecutor for the Libby case, and even more egregiously it's what they did with these so-called special prosecutors for the CIA destruction of tapes and the U.S. attorney firings, because those aren't actually outside people at all.
Elizabeth, I'm sorry. Sorry, I've interrupted you twice. My apologies.
No, that's okay.
Elizabeth de la Vega, the former federal prosecutor, the author of The United States versus George W. Bush et al. It's an intriguing perspective, and I think one that has some great merit to it. And thank you for that, and thank you for your time tonight.
Well, thanks for having me, Keith.